To understand what intuition is, we must first understand what intuition isn't. Oftentimes, intuition is mistaken for an emotional reaction. But intuition is a deep knowing that transcends our emotions. It truly is a pure knowing and a pure being. And no matter how many words that we use to describe it, just like a pure knowing or a true being, it is only really experienced. There have been times where you've experienced this knowing, where you know the difference between the fear, which is why sometimes you are told to act despite your fears. Oftentimes, because we are so addicted to the physical world of emotions and thought programming that all we do is we fall into the trap of what is familiar to us. See, this familiarity with our emotions is oftentimes what keeps us trapped. So, for example, you grew up, let's say, not being treated well at home, so you develop low self-esteem and you allow others not to treat you well not because it feels good, though in some strange way it does feel good to you because it is familiar. So the reason why you want to become more connected to the true you, to the soul you, and to, in a way, step back from your emotional reactions and your thought patterns is because you are so addicted to what's familiar that even if you are reacting to your emotions, because they come on so powerfully, and they have such a strong grip on us because you might be familiar to certain emotions, you will mistake it for your intuition. And it's very addictive. See, our emotional reactions and what is familiar to us, they're very addictive. They are habits, which is why we do them. An addiction is something that you do in spite of doing it because it's good for you. You do it in spite of your true higher self, that's pure light of being that wants to guide you to what is good for you. The first practice is to take a step back, to become an observer of your own thoughts and emotions. And as you do, you'll see things pass by. Again, in the practice of meditation, this is one of the aspects that is often encouraged to begin, even if you can't quiet the mind, to allow everything to observe. And as you do, you will begin to really plug into what it is to be your soul self and your higher being as it is observing you without judgment, without an emotional reaction. Intuition is one of the most misunderstood aspects of being a human being, oftentimes because it is mistaken for an emotional reaction. It could be a positive emotion or a negative emotion. No matter what it is, an emotional reaction is an emotional reaction. What makes intuition so powerful is that it transcends our physical aspects of us. Now, when I speak about a physical aspect, many people might just think of the physical as the material world, as in our physical bodies and the things that we are surrounded by. But the physical world is actually our thoughts and our emotions and our sensations, including the actual physical, tangible aspects of the world around us. Now, most of us is existing in the non-physical world, which is the world that we do not see, though we are aware of it. Not all the time, but sometimes it is the source of all greater things. What's important to become aware of is how the non-physical aspect of us, how the non-physical aspect of the world plays an important, really deeply important role in who we are and how we are in the world around us. See, our thoughts and emotions are deeply manipulated and manipulative because they are fully based in the physical world. So, for example, your mind and who you are is an amalgamation of everything else around you that has been since your childhood. So you might think you're a unique you with your own thoughts and actions, but chances are that you have been, not chances are, but the truth is that you have been programmed from a very young age by the people around you. You have certain belief systems and certain ways of being. There are certain aspects of human nature that transcend culture. However, in many cases, we are deeply influenced by the world around us. So intuition, in a way, transcends this aspect of us. It is truly plugged into our higher being, to the greater aspect of who we are. You might call it a higher being, a greater being, the non-physical being, or the soul. Whatever you call it is important to understand that this aspect of who we are, it is so deeply essential and important that we oftentimes forget it. And this is where intuition comes to place. See, because our soul and our higher being has access to the greater source of everything, it also has access to greater wisdom, to greater knowledge. So when we allow the intuition to come forth and we practice living more intuitively, we get access to this greater wisdom. But how? Trust is an important aspect. Trust is not something that we do easily, especially if we are more based in logic and reasoning. While logic and reasoning is very important, oftentimes these words are thrown around because they seem so lofty and important, and they make us seem so normal. But oftentimes what is logic to one person is madness to another. Oftentimes we can agree on certain terms of logic, but logic and reasoning can be overused. Someone who can be missing a certain level of schooling might come to an intuitive decision and awareness much more quickly than someone who might have, on the same subject, on the same topic, who might have great schooling and great logic and reasoning. And part of why this happens is because intuition is not based necessarily on our programming. Though intuition is pulling from the unconscious aspect of us, it is also pulling from the greater aspect of wisdom. And again, this may sound very lofty for some, this concept of greater intuition, but we have all used it at certain aspects of our lives. The thing is, how do we get to do that more consistently? Well, the way that we get to do that more consistently is by aligning our thoughts and our feelings so that we can become greater channels for accessing this greater intuitive connection. Because it truly is a connection. Intuition is not just something that you can force on. You can say, well, right now I want to be more intuitive. You can do that with logic or reasoning, and research helps with this. You can, to come to a more logical, reasonable decision, you can begin to speak to a lot of people. You can begin to do a lot of research. And after speaking to many people and getting different opinions and doing a lot of research, you can come to a decision. Now, it might not be the best decision for you because it might not be based on your intuition, but you might call it a reasonable decision, a logical decision. Intuition might also be confused for emotion. For example, you might have a fear and consider this fear to be the truth. Or let's say the example of a job interview. Maybe you have a job interview and you wake up in the morning, but something kicks in and you get a weird feeling, you might call it, and you might confuse this with intuition. It might be something like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go to this job interview today. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this job isn't quite right for me. So this hunch that you get, that you call it a hunch, begins to affect all the decisions that you make. So you say, well, you dress from this place now of having this weird hunch. You dress from this place of having this weird fear. And you begin to now think from this place as well. And so maybe you are late for the job interview. And when you get there, you're a bit frazzled because you're late. And then that inner fear becomes stronger. And so if you confuse this for intuition, you'll go there and now you're giving off this, you're creating certain vibrations, right? Because you're in an electromagnetic field and the person sitting from you feels it, whether they can do so, whether they can elaborate on it reasonably or logically or not, doesn't matter. They're feeling whatever you're sending off. These can be very subtle energies, and then this affects the interview all around, the exchange that you have with the person that is interviewing you. Then you go home, you learn that you didn't get the interview, and you say, wow, I was right, because I had this feeling that this wasn't right for me. See, intuition is a very calm, non-judgmental, non-emotional hunch. It does not come in the sense of fear. It is not affected by your inner biases. But it is very easy for this to happen. Desire, if you have a great desire for something, you might project this desire internally and say that it is an intuition. And it's the same thing for hope. But what intuition is this sense of calm. So one of the best ways to achieve this place of calm more consistently is by meditation and mindfulness, by sort of calming ourselves. Or if you cannot, in the beginning, calm yourself, is beginning to engage your mind a little bit differently. We cannot escape our physical reality. As I mentioned, our physical reality, our thoughts and our feelings. However, what we can do is we can begin to find balance. We can begin to have an awareness of ourselves. We can begin to have an awareness of who we are, what our overall mental and emotional health is, what our general feelings are. For example, if you grew up in a home that generally was healthy, you ate healthy, you had healthy eating habits, you might grow up and have a healthy relationship with food and make very intuitive based choices when it comes to food, because you have a sort of aligned mental, emotional mindset when it comes to food. And so people might look around you and you might even travel and generally make healthy choices because you don't have many issues when it comes to food. But chances are, because most of us have been programmed and most of us have grown in homes and environments with their own sets of issues, when we go out into the world, we have our own biases. You inherit a series of mental, emotional issues that begin to paint everything around you. So what you think is intuition is really all these emotional reactions and a lot of fears, anxieties, and deep unfulfilled desires that you try to now excuse with intuition. But as I mentioned, intuition is a calm knowing. And the only way that you can get there is by, one, getting greater awareness, two, developing greater trust with yourself and the world around you, and in a sense, accepting the imperfections of the world that you live in. Because we live in a physical reality and we often abandon the aspects of the greater us, the greater self, which is the higher being, the soul self that is connected to the greater source, we also forget to plug into it. When we plug into it, just like when you plug into functioning electricity, the light turns on. Your toaster works. You can toast your bread and have your breakfast. Your refrigerator works. But sometimes that wiring is off in us, and that is what the mental, emotional, physical aspect for us is. However, one great shortcut to this, which is sort of like your own personal electrician, is your soul. Your soul, in a way, when you plug into it and you learn to plug into it, can give you greater insights. And it can lead you to better paths to even find the healing that you need to gain this mental, emotional balance that makes you a better channel for intuition. See, chances are, if you're watching this video, you are looking to access greater intuitive powers, because literally it is a power. Just like electricity gives us power, so does intuition plug us into greater power. So there are simple exercises that you can do every day to reawaken your intuition. And the beauty of doing these exercises is that in a way you are also learning to test your own connection to the greater aspect of you. And as you do this, you also become more aware of your mental, emotional health and stability and connection. And so, what are some of these ways in which we plug into? Now, we grew up in a society that is still very logic-based. So, you can have a grandma in one part of the world that can come to a very powerful, intuitive choice on the same thing that could take someone else on the other side of the world a great amount of research and logic and reasoning. So again, the difference is being able to apply the more natural process. The natural process I mentioned is an awareness of who you are and what you are, a calm mind, and trust. Beginning to trust yourself and the world around you. Beginning to understand that as you practice intuition, you might make choices that are not intuitive, that might be more emotionally based. And when you do, it's important not to punish yourself. Oftentimes we will do that. We will punish ourselves and we will lose trust. We will lose trust in us, and we will lose trust in the greater faculties of us. It's just sometimes if, let's say, you are having issues with electricity, you cannot all of a sudden just say, well, electricity doesn't work, I abandon this altogether. No, there might be, you need to reset something, or you do need to get your electrician in there. That is in a way what meditation does. It calms us, and it plugs us into that simple calmness and that simple knowingness, which is what truly intuition represents, which is that knowingness. Oftentimes we don't know what knowingness is because our knowingness has often come in the form of others' opinions, our parents, what they thought was right for us, what we discover on the internet, like you are right now, and what the world around us says. So we forget that knowing that sometimes you see others apply where, they seem to sort of break away from what everybody else is saying and follow that knowing, and lo and behold, something happens that is quite extraordinary. And we all have access to this knowing. It truly is by plugging into that higher self, and that is a practice. There are some practical steps that I will share with you in a following video that you can do every day to practice little bits of your intuition. But the greater aspect of that is to truly begin to listen to you. And that you, that is pure you, it is not judgmental. It is not fearful. It is not anxiety ridden. It is not even hopeful, though hopeful is a closer aspect to what it is. It truly is a pure knowing that wants to guide you to what is good for you. So again, the first practice is to take a step back, to become an observer of your own thoughts and emotions. Really plug into what it is to be your soul self and your higher being as it is observing you without judgment, without an emotional reaction. In future videos, I will be sharing with you some practical exercises. But for now, really quiet your mind, really unplug from your emotional reactions, breathe, and your intuition will slowly awaken.